My name is Debbie McNeil, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters, Edina. I am the moderator for tonight's Hopkins School Board Candidate Forum. I welcome you all on behalf of the League of Women Voters, Minnetonka, Eden Prairie, Hopkins. The League of Women Voters is a volunteer, nonpartisan political organization which encourages informed and active participation in government. It works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and it influences public policy through education and advocacy. The representatives for the League of Women Voters will be available in the lobby after this forum to meet with the candidates and the audience. The League of Women Voters does not support or oppose any political party or any candidate, so the views expressed in this forum will be those of the candidates and not those of the League of Women Voters. The purpose in sponsoring meetings like this is to provide you, the voters, with an opportunity to hear the candidates discuss issues that are important to you. There will not be enough time to cover all the issues tonight, so if your question is not addressed, please feel free to contact the candidates directly. This event is being broadcast now live on community cable TV, and it will be rebroadcast repeatedly in its entirety. It will also be available by streaming video at the city's website and at LWVMEPH.org. Individual recording and photography that does not disrupt the event is allowed. Tonight's questions will be submitted by our live audience, you members of the audience, and also online. Questions that are unclear or hostile or of a personal nature will not be used, and those that fall in the same general subject category may be consolidated. The question cards become the property of the League of Women Voters, MEPH. If the answer was unclear to you, please feel free to submit a follow-up question or talk to the candidates after the forum. I will now introduce you to the candidates for the Hopkins School Board. The Hopkins School Board election will fill 4 seats, and we have 7 candidates: Steve Adams, Shannon Andreessen, Ben Carls, Tanya Kahn, David Larson, Chris Newcomer, Katie O'Shea Peterson. Thank you, candidates, and thank you, audience, for coming tonight. We will begin now with 2-minute opening statements. And after that, the candidates will have 1 minute to respond to each question submitted by the audience or online. The order of responses will be rotated. And the candidate forum will wrap up with 1-minute closing statements from each candidate. The candidates' answers will be timed by a member of the League of Women Voters. Candidates, this member is sitting in the front row, and she will hold up signs telling you how much time you have left for your answer. She will hold up signs for 1 minute left, 30 seconds left, 15 seconds left, and a sign that says you must stop. And we ask that you obey the stop sign. So let's start now with opening statements. And to start with, we'll go right down the order that you are seated in with 2-minute opening statements, beginning with Steve Adams.
Thank you. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for organizing this forum. I've attended their meetings, and I know what a valuable resource they are for the voting public. I also want to thank the voters here tonight and those watching on TV or on the internet. My name is Steve Adams, and I've served on the Hopkins School Board for the past 8 years, the last 6 as treasurer. Before being elected to the board, I served on the City of Minnetonka Planning Commission for 6 years, 2 as the vice chair. I've lived in the Hopkins district for 35 years and have been married to my wife, Donna, who's out here somewhere tonight, for 40 years. Our 2 grown children, Julia and Michael, are Hopkins graduates and have successful careers in biotechnology and automotive engineering. I graduated from McAllister College and was employed in sales and marketing with various IT companies for over 30 years, starting at IBM. I founded and operated my own IT services company in the Hopkins district for 10 of those years. And in 2006, I earned a master's degree in business administration from the University of St. Thomas. In the time that I've served on the Hopkins School Board, we've invested in a number of strategic efforts to improve student learning. We've extended our STEM education curriculum into preschool. We've added a world language in every elementary school. We added the International Baccalaureate curriculum for all junior high students. We issued a digital device to every student in grades 1 through 12. We funded after-school tutoring for high school students. And in 2017, we hired a spectacular new superintendent, Dr. Mary Perry Reed. And last year, we embarked on a strategic plan called Vision 2031 to take our schools from great to world class. And last summer, we added flexible learning spaces to all of our secondary schools, thanks to the referendum our voters passed in 2017. I ask the voters to keep the momentum going by voting for me on November 5th. Thank you.
Shannon Andreessen.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting and organizing this forum. I'm heartened to see so many candidates here, and I'm thankful that you too are showing up for Hopkins schools. But I'm most excited to be in a room full of people who care deeply about our schools, our students, and our families. Our schools are the heart of our community. They are where we gather, learn, and grow together. And you get that. That's why you're here. I'm grateful to have the chance to tell you my Hopkins story, why I'm here, and why I continue to show up for families. My two sons access services across the educational landscape, from special services to accelerated learning. And their journey has been our family's journey into the warm and rich Hopkins community that started 12 years ago. This district has supported our family as we've grown from Harley Hopkins to the high school, and I'm always looking for ways to return that support. For 5 years, I've served on the district's Legislative Action Coalition, working closely with the school board and legislators for increased educational funding and laws that improve our schools. I do this not only because I believe in public education, but because I believe all students deserve a brilliant future. I've spent my career as an advocate for special needs families, using my skills in communications and program development to enhance unheard voices, build community relationships, and leverage community connections for action for Minnesota families. As a school board member, I will continue to advocate for Hopkins schools and your family around mental health, literacy, accelerated learning, equity, and inclusion. Tonight, I look forward to earning your vote on November 5th.
Ben Carls.
Good evening, friends and fellow travelers. Thank you, League of Women Voters, for allowing us to have this forum, and thank you for coming tonight to hear us as we talk about our visions of how we can help make Hopkins schools move from great to world class. My educational journey as a leader and as a teacher begins in Hopkins as I started teaching at West Junior High in the late 90s, before moving on to the Osseo School District, where I'm currently a teacher leader and online learning coordinator. Starting in Hopkins helped me be idealistic, and I was a little rough when I started, but I left an impact. And when my family was looking to move into a district that could support my family, who we are, as two dads raising two children of color, we liked Hopkins diversity. It appealed to us, and we appreciated the strides towards equity that the district was already making. When Dr. Mary Perry Reed took over as superintendent and we saw the Vision 2031, we were excited. And I thought, what could I do to give back to the community that I had been part of as a teacher, now part of as a parent, and as a resident of my small little scratch of Edina, where I'm encouraging families to stay with Hopkins and not give in to the pressure to open enroll. As parents of two children of color, like I said, diversity was important to us, and so I look forward to where we can go with increasing opportunities for equity and innovation to prepare all of our scholars, not just my own two children, but all of our scholars and community members with community education towards 2031 and innovation into the future that we are giving them. That's it. Thank you.
Tanya Khan.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters who decided to graciously hold this event, and thank you to all of you audience members for coming tonight. Hi, my name is Tanya Khan, and I'm running for the Hopkins School Board. When I walked into Alice Smith Elementary 10 years ago, I was overjoyed to see every other child was a student of color. Everyone there was friendly and welcoming, which was vastly different from my experience in elementary school when I lived in upstate New York. I had the misfortune to suffer a lot of aggression at the hands of students and teachers. In Hopkins, however, both my children and myself were embraced. We have not experienced the adversity I had to go through as a child. My daughter has since graduated from Hopkins, and she's currently attending Loyola University in Chicago. My son is a junior in Hopkins High School. In regards to my education, I have a degree in English literature from the University of Rochester in New York. Regarding my work experience, I taught as a substitute teacher in the Hopkins Public Schools for over 2 years. I went on to work at Hopkins High School as the media paraspecialist for over 5.5 years. Outside of school, I have served on the Legislative Action Coalition, where I worked with other members to help pass legislation pertaining to the betterment of Hopkins Public Schools. I've actively volunteered for Resource West, which helps families access programs and other resources they need. Recently, I accepted an invitation to serve on the Hopkins Community Education Advisory Council. Out of love and a sincere desire to wholeheartedly give back to the district that has brought myself and my children nothing but happiness and acceptance, I want to serve Hopkins schools. I wish to see all Hopkins students thrive and flourish, just as my children have. I believe that Vision 2031 will be the revolutionary endeavor, which will make our students critical and empathic thinkers, undaunted by an increasingly shifting and diverse workforce. Please vote for me on November 5th. Thank you.
David Larson.
Hello, my name is Dave Larson, and I want to just say some of the same things that my coworker Steve Adams talked about, the work we did on the school board. I ran 3.5 years ago. This is my first term. I'm seeking re-election. I've been a resident of Minnetonka for about 44 years. Carol and I, she's in the audience, we have 3 grown daughters, Tammy, Laura, and Jennifer, all graduates through Gatewood, West Junior High, and high school. In fact, even the first daughter, it was called Lindbergh back then. My background, I'll give you a snapshot. It'll be just a short picture of who I am. I had a career with Control Data and got laid off back after 26 years because Control Data then became Ceridian. Besides that, I then worked for Metropolitan Center for Independent Living, which was an organization dealing with issues with the disability organizations. My education, the University of Minnesota. Also, I graduated from the law school from the university. I am a proponent of public education, whether it's at the elementary, high school, secondary, or university level. Let's see, some of the community organizations. I belong to the Bar Association. Currently, I am on the Charter Commission with the City of Minnetonka. I'm in Ward 4 here. And as my parting words, I'd like to thank the League also from Minnetonka, Hopkins, and Eden Prairie for hosting and planning this. It's a lot of work. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Chris Newcomer.
Thank you, League of Women Voters, for sponsoring tonight's forum. I believe your mission to encourage active participation in democracy makes this all better. I am currently the vice chair of the Hopkins School Board. I, for some reason, love policy, and that's what the vice chair does. I also grew up in Golden Valley, so I have been in this area for, I'm not going to tell you how many years. To me, education is the key to so many opportunities in life, and making sure our community provides quality education is exactly what we need to be doing for the next generation. My experiences, both in the corporate world and having served on the Hopkins School Board for 8 years, provide me with a broad understanding of education and an expansive worldview. I can think of no better way to give back to the school district that has given my children so much than to continue serving on the school board. Our district is in an exciting place with a vision of changing education for all. If you look at a classroom from 1919 to today, they look the same, but our world is so different. Schools will never stop teaching reading, math, social studies, the arts, But since we do not have any idea what our current first graders will be doing upon graduation, we need to focus on the broader skills of cultural literacy, digital literacy, learning to move between working independently and collaboratively. As an elected board member, it's imperative that we work for all our parents and to make sure that we have concrete efforts to hear from as many voices as possible. I will continue to make sure we are present in the community in a variety of settings. I do believe that all parents love their children and want the best for them. What we need to do is provide schools that work for each and every one of their children so they can have a brilliant future. Thank you.
Katie O'Shea Peterson.
Hi, good evening. Thanks to the League of Women Voters for organizing this evening, all of you guys for being here, and to my fellow candidates for their willingness to serve. I'm Katie O'Shea Peterson, the lucky mom to Hopkins Elementary second and third grader. My husband and I have been avid consumers of the services put forth by the Hopkins School District through community ed and the elementary schools since both of our kids went through the Stepping Stones program at Meadowbrook. Professionally, I have a 19-year career in cybersecurity and high tech. It's that career that's given me the opportunity to see organizations attempt massive change. And I've seen that done successfully and unsuccessfully. It's my opinion that to do that successfully, we need a clearly communicated vision, consistency in our direction and our action, and collaboration with all of the stakeholders. I believe I can bring all of those things and determination to the table. I've been inspired by Dr. Mary Perry Reid's Vision 2031. And in my campaign, I'm focusing on finding ways to embrace that vision. The board is going to be integral in helping create that framework. I'm also focusing on evolving our classrooms, our processes, and the technologies to ensure that we're meeting Hopkins students where they're at and providing them all of the tools that they need to be successful. Finally, I'm focused on continuing the 2018 and 2019 trend of increased enrollment at Hopkins Public Schools and ending the decades-long trend of attrition to neighboring districts. Pretty passionate about that one, actually. I'm inspired by the spirit of collaboration that the current school board shows. I want to be a part of it, and I believe that I'm well suited to help drive forward Vision 2031. Thanks.
Now we'll start with questions that have been submitted online and from the live audience. Now we'll mix it up, and so we won't just call on everybody in order, if that's okay. And so we'll start with the first question, and we'll start with Katie O'Shea Peterson to answer this, and you'll all get a chance to answer it. These answers will now be for 1 minute. Here's the question. What is your experience in school district leadership? So can we start with you, Katie O'Shea Peterson?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
I am not afraid to admit that I'm probably not your typical pedigreed school board candidate. I don't have a lot of experience with serving in or participating in public education outside of being a consumer of the services and the art adventure coordinator for Meadowbrook Elementary. That said, we are all about diversity in Hopkins Public Schools, and I think that diversity has to expand to our school board. And I know that the traits that I bring from my professional background and frankly, kind of a tenacious personality, make me well suited regardless of perhaps the lack of that educational-based experience.
Thank you. Steve Adams.
Well, I'm on the school board. So that's one example. And beyond that, even before I was on the school board, I was active in our kids' school, Tanglin Elementary. Attended many PTO meetings. Luckily, never was chosen as a leader, but was active in the school there, and continue to be. One of the things we do as school board members is we volunteer to be a liaison with some of our elementary schools, and I've done that for Tanglin, so I'm over there frequently and keeping tabs on what's going on. So and other than that, I am a licensed substitute teacher for the state of Minnesota, so I've done some substitute teaching in other districts.
Shannon Andreessen.
Thank you. I think that's a really important question because as we're going through these changes in the district, it's important that we have strong, consistent leaders that are taking us through this. I've served on the LAC for 5 years, working with the school board to lobby for stable mental health funding, alternative paths for teacher licensure, eliminating the special education cross-subsidy, safe schools, and so much more that impacts our schools every day. But on top of that, I'm dedicated to increasing the resources for families in our community. I used to serve as an executive director for a nonprofit that was essential in educating and empowering parents to connect and engage them in their home schools and communities. So I know how important community is, bringing that community into the school, but also knowing that when students leave the building, they need to have support and resources at their disposal.
Ben Carls.
As an educational leader in the Osseo area schools currently, my experience in school district leadership has been multiple ways, including leading equity foundational training for our entire district, helping plan out how our entire system will make sure we are doing right by all of our students, especially for our students of color and our students who are LGBT. Some of the other work I've been involved with has been the Every Student Succeeds Act and making sure that our schools are in compliance with that so all scholars are achieving the goals we set forward for them for graduation, as well as moving my current district forward in innovation and in online learning, which we are on the cutting edge for in the northern suburbs.
Tanya Khan.
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. What is your experience in school district leadership?
Regarding school district leadership, I have worked actively in Hopkins schools. I worked as a substitute teacher across the district, and I've also worked at the media center at the high school as the media paraspecialist for over 5.5 years. Outside of school, I served on the Legislative Action Coalition, and I also have actively volunteered for Resource West. And recently, I was invited to be part of the Hopkins Community Education Advisory Council.
David Larson.
Well, for starters, I am not a teacher. My business background is one that gave me skills in leadership. One of the more fun things that involved with experience with schools is Carol and I were chaperones at all the senior parties, and those are lots of fun, and we were able to control the group, at least the ones that were under our control. Besides that, I've had daughters that have been into gymnastics, swimming, variety of activities. I am surrounded by teachers. I have them all the way now, and kids in school. They're in 3 different school districts. They are ages from 5 years old to 22, from St. Thomas to the schools in Bloomington. I have a rule, they can only talk about education for 5 minutes whenever we have a family event. They seem to, I should get a timer so that we can go on to other topics. I love talking with them. They're a great family. Thank you, and 60 seconds is up.
Chris Newcomer.
Thank you. One experience I haven't had in Hopkins District is being on a field trip, so couldn't stand lack of control. Other than that, I have been on the Hopkins School Board now for, it will be 8 years. Before that, I chaired one of the referendums in 2013. Worked at the high school for a little bit. Also was, I spent 6 years on the Hopkins Education Foundation as it was growing, and now it's grown into such an amazing organization that is really critical to our schools and the innovation in our schools. So that experience is very broad. In my business life, right now I'm an executive director of a nonprofit, but my background is also in marketing and technology. So coming together from both the education experience and the business world, that's a world view that we sometimes don't get on the school board. So I bring both of those experiences together. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Here's the second question, and we'll lead off with Chris Newcomer for answers. If you're an incumbent, how have you actively engaged with the community over the past 4 years? And if you are a new candidate, How do you plan to actively engage with the community over the next 4 years? Let's start with Chris Newcomer, and this is 1-minute answers again.
I think the school board has done in the last few years a very good job of reaching out and being in the community. I think engaging with the community also means showing up. And showing up is not necessarily at a planned event. It's at the school, it's at the grocery store, at the coffee shop. I was at a Caribou one time and overheard 3 high school kids talking about what they wanted the principal to know as they graduated, and stepped over and had a really lovely conversation for about 45 minutes with them. So what I've done is really to be there. Glen Lake is my school that I have now, each member has taken on a school. I have Glen Lake and I have West. So learning to be there and showing up and talking to them is really important. I spent some time at back to school night, which I think we should all be at our schools for back to school night, because you really got a chance to talk to parents when they were in and excited about being a part of that school. So having planned events is important, but also just showing up randomly at other events is also important.
Katie O'Shea Peterson.
You know, while I was preparing for this evening, I happened to watch the current school board members doing this 2 years ago, and was inspired by hearing Fartun talk about her experience and her family's experience trying to navigate the school district with little to no experience. And that really opened my eyes as somebody who grew up in the US and with parents who understood how to navigate our system. So I think first and foremost, it's really important to ensure that everyone in our district is able to navigate and get the information, and that it's provided to them in languages that they are able to consume. I think that the breadth of how we communicate is key moving forward. I also think that, as Chris said, getting out there and being present and socializing tends to be something, for better or for worse, I do pretty well. So I think showing up, but also making it available, all of our resources, and communicating what we can do to everyone in our district.
Steve Adams.
Oh gosh, my calendar is so full of things that I go to and attend, but I chaired the Association of Metropolitan School Districts for a year. That's an association of 44 school districts in the Twin Cities, and found out how their best practices and what they're doing. But locally, I was a member of I chaired actually the Imagine Minnetonka Task Force a couple of years ago. I was on the 2040 Comprehensive Plan Committee. I chaired Empty Bowls one year, thanks to Barb. Football games, city leadership. Rhoda and I met this morning, or over noon, with city managers and council people from the 5 of the districts that we represent, that are represented in the district. So I've had lots of opportunity to do leadership in the district.
Shannon Andreessen.
Thank you. I think that it's important that we recognize ways in which the candidates have also been engaged if you're not an incumbent. Over the past 5 years, I've been active on the LAC, being heavily engaged with the district, and also am engaged as an active parent in my son's schools, Alice Smith and the high school. But beyond that, I think that it's really important that you show up and you're present, but you go beyond that and you follow through. You listen in an active way to what the community has to say. You absorb, reflect, and then activate around the issues that are most important to our families. And you can't do that if you aren't there to listen. So I will continue to do all of this work. Last year I served on 2 Vision 2031 strategic focus teams, and I will also continue to develop community services and programs that educate and empower families.
Ben Carls.
One of the ways I've been engaging in the 3 years we've lived in the district is reaching out to my Edina neighbors to find out why are they open enrolling at Edina, and what is the barrier that the green wall is providing, both here and then also the people open enrolling to Minnetonka. Why are they leaving to go to those districts when we offer a world-class educational experience with diverse learners? And part of that is looking at what in the system is working for the kids it's working for and the families it's working for, and also looking for where is it not working. Where are we not meeting the needs of our people of color in the community who feel disenfranchised, or where school is a traumatic experience, and we've committed that trauma, and where can we repair that through authentic communication and listening?
Tanya Khan.
Of course, I've worked in the school district for over 7.5 years, so I've been very active. And the other things that I did while I was working at Hopkins schools was really connect with our students. We've had some absolutely wonderful, brilliant, and very bright students go through our schools, and I've had really great relationships with all of them. One of them I'd like to talk about. His name was Lee, and he was a wonderful student who invited me to do sensitivity training for our trans students. And it was so wonderful to support him, even though some people are saying, oh, you're not going to be paid. And I said, I don't care, I want to be there for Lee. And at the end, he was so happy. He gave me a big hug, and he wrote me a note and gave me flowers. So that was really, really nice. The other things that I've done in the district is go to our food trucks and speak to a lot of parents. And that's been a great, wonderful, and learning experience. Thank you.
Dave Larson.
I don't know if a lot of you know that a lot of the work of the school board is done in committees so that we can use our time very, very wisely. Part of it, Chris here heads up the monitor committee. One of the major functions of a school board is to take account of the various policies to make sure we're on track. Chris has done a fabulous job. On one of my committees I'm involved with was the special ed committee, special ed advisory committee. It's a group of parents. It's one that you can see what their issues are, and you're the liaison from the school board to the particular parent committee. So there's a lot of ways that you can be involved that are not visible to the general public. I think some of the other things that are involved with is that we were, between Chris and Steve and myself, we were part of the group that was on the selection committee for the new superintendent. That's also that's the one employee that we have, that we are responsible for.
Thank you. Here's the next question for all the candidates, and we'll begin with David Larson. What would you do about declining enrollment in the school district and the loss of students through open enrollment? We start with you, Dave Larson.
Sure. When I was running before and running again, my priorities are student achievement. Basically, it's also to support teachers so that the staff is good, and also being responsible with taxpayers' money. If you are going from great to world class, you put that together, that will have people wanting to have Hopkins School District be their destination. And that is basically what Rhoda is going for with Vision 2031. It's last year's kindergarten class, as they graduate, be 2031. Already, the kindergarten class coming up has increased 50 people over its projection. So do good, the enrollment will go up.
Chris Newcomer.
Thank you. One thing to remember with declining enrollment, it also is demographic. Something we can't change because we can't make people have babies, unfortunately. But I think one of the ways we're seeing that we're counteracting declining enrollment is we're changing the way we do school. And whenever you change the way you do school, which is very much a part of Vision 2031, people will take notice. And once people take notice, they start to listen and hear. And they're starting to hear better things about Hopkins. And I think at that point, it's sort of like messaging. When you hear something 7 times, you sort of say, maybe I should think about that. I think the work that we've been doing and the press and the conversations we've been having have really allowed us to change people's minds about how we do school. And I think we just need to keep improving how we do school.
Katie O'Shea Peterson.
So I have learned that approaching individual real estate agents and accosting them about listing homes as able to be open enrolled is not scalable. Steve knows this as well. So beyond just that effort, like I said, kind of passionate about this one, I do want to focus on the fact that enrollments increased in 2018 and 2019. And I'm going to give a lot of props to the current school board and Dr. Mary Peary-Reed for their efforts in getting that trend to change. I think that it's also about misperceptions about the Hopkins School District and a bit about narrow-mindedness and the values of diversity. And so I think that if we continue to show just what type of students we produce here at Hopkins and show the world and show our neighbors, that we'll continue to see those 2018 and 2019 trends continue.
Steve Adams.
Thank you. Actually, we do have open enrollment out. We also have open enrollment in. And in fact, we have more in than we do out. So, you know, it's a myth that we're bleeding, hemorrhaging students. It's being held very stable. As Chris pointed out, we can't do much about the birth rate. You know, that's something that's happening in Hennepin County, and it's a fact of life for all school districts. But one of the things we can do to keep people, to attract people, is maintain our facilities. And I've looked at our facilities compared to others and in other districts, and we do a very good job of that. And marketing, we just have to do a better job of marketing, I think. You know, letting parents know what are the benefits of keeping their kids in the district. You know, what do we offer that other districts don't? Because there are significant differences, and just concentrate on that.
Shannon Andreessen.
Thank you. So I live in Minnetonka, so I experience this issue of students open enrolling to other districts firsthand. On our street that we live on, we are the only family that sends their student to Hopkins schools. So I get that it is an issue, but when I volunteered to call kindergarten families, potential kindergarten families with our school of choice, Alice Smith, I heard over and over again from parents who had decided to send their children to another school that they had never heard the stories I was sharing with them. So they decided that, and they told me that they would give Hopkins schools a second look. They want to be connected, they want their children to go to school with their neighbors, but they need a reason to do so. So we need to stop letting numbers tell the Hopkins story and start sharing with everyone we know the success stories that we see every day in our schools. Thank you.
Ben Carls.
Much like all the candidates here, both the ones currently on the board and the ones seeking it for the first time, it is that story about why we care about the district, and it is that diversity of the district, that strength that we draw from each other, from the different parts of the communities that we all come from. And I think that is the narrative that we are working on building, that brand with the Vision 2031 and with that communication of what we do in our schools. And I think continuing that, letting people know about the value-added nature of our district and the values behind every decision that's made, how we keep our scholars in the first and foremost part of our mind in thinking of our vision, not so much about property taxes or values of the community as structures, but more as the people who make our communities what they are.
Tanya Khan.
Regarding the declining enrollment, I will try to increase family engagement by having a strong online presence. There's a new thing that I've noticed on our Twitter and Facebook pages there is a gentleman named Alex Fisher, and he is our Hopkins Community Education head. He has had the most entertaining and most attractive tweets and Facebook posts regarding how amazing our district is. So even if I was, you know, a stranger, I would be like, oh my gosh, I have to attend this school and send my kids there. The second thing that I want to do is possibly conduct exit interviews with families who have left, just to see what we could do to improve their experience. And I also want to make sure that I listen and accommodate parents and staff. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Here's another question that we'll start with Tanya Khan for answers. What do you see as the most pressing issues faced by the school district, and how can community education help to address them? What do you see as the most pressing issues faced by the school district, and how can community education help to address them? Tanya Khan, would you like to start?
Yeah,
Thank you.
So I think the most important thing is to make sure that our students learn self-care, and by actually our students should learn, our teachers should learn to give the kind of care that students will react to in a positive manner. I think we should encourage learner-centered classrooms, which will support multiple modalities. And that's it. Thanks.
Dave Larson.
Let's see, what are some of the pressing issues? I think some of them are, besides student achievement, I think we have to have an increased emphasis on the mental and physical health of our students. To me, the most important customer we have are the students. So for me, they're primary. The other issue is, and it's always a question of money, it requires good financial management. That is a necessity. The different formulas are difficult for the general public to understand, and there's a squeeze on it. We've got to fund education more fully. And then I am interested in that we make sure that we balance technology and the arts. We should have things where activities, the arts, and athletics are blended in with STEM, besides the science, technical, engineering, all the other issues. It has to be a balance. So it's curriculum balance. Thank you.
Chris Newcomer.
Well, I'm sure we're going to get another question about budgets and finance, so that is probably our most pressing issue. But when you look at the ability of community ed to help some of the other issues we're facing, particularly around the achievement gap, I think the work that community ed has done in educating our youngest learners, 0 to 5, before they come into our schools, to be really ready to be in a classroom. Sometimes, for many years, we got kids who had never been in a classroom till kindergarten, and that's very hard when you have kids who've gone to preschool and have not gone to any kind of school. So by some of our programs, our Ready for K programs, we're allowing kids to understand how to be in a classroom and be part of a school and a community early enough that we can try to work through making sure that they really are functioning well and learning well right away in their school. So I think community education has a huge impact on our early learners, and it's a place where they should be doing their best work, which I believe they do in Hopkins.
Katie O'Shea Peterson.
So I think that for me, I view the biggest hurdle in our future is figuring out how to braid together fiscal responsibility with audacious goal setting. I am hugely passionate about Vision 2031 and incredibly realistic about the financial implications that change has on organizations and school districts in general. I think that we need to be bold yet thoughtful in how we approach those changes. So I think that's kind of the big one, but I'll also say that the mental health of our students and the addition of the mental health centers, thanks to additional funding and the HEF grant in particular, I think is going a great start at addressing the mental health issues that our students are experiencing. It's never easy to be a kid, but I don't know that it's ever been harder than it is to be a kid right now. So those are kind of the two things that pop to mind.
Steve Adams.
Thank you. I think finances are the most pressing issue. When you consider that 60% of our funding comes from the state, it's a constant battle every year. I chair the Legislative Action Coalition, and every year we spend time over at the state of Minnesota with legislators, trying to educate them on what our needs are. And it's not fair for us to pass the funding on to our taxpayers that is not covered by the state. We've got a cross-subsidy for special education in Minnesota that I think is one of the highest in the nation. But it comes about because the state and the federal authorities do not fully fund special education as they promised they would when the act was passed in 1984. So special education in the Hopkins School District is funded $7 million to fill that gap that's being left by the legislature and the feds. Other items of local control I could go into, but my time's up. So.
Shannon Andreessen.
Thank you. I think that some of the most pressing issues that are facing the Hopkins School District have to do with vigilant equity and breaking apart service silos. And that's one of the wonderful ways that community education comes in. They did a wonderful thing this summer where they blended their summer school options with their Camp Royal. So improving access for students who would normally be at summer school to get these enrichment opportunities that are provided through community ed is really a wonderful way to address these issues. Community ed is also a really important place for students with special needs because they can pursue their special interests and really shine in that environment. So making it more accessible would be breaking apart the service silos our students often experience in the district.
Ben Carls.
In talking with teachers in the district, as well as families in the district, we know that mental health is a serious concern. Making sure our students and our teachers have the skills and the tools necessary to support them as they deal with social emotional learning and school safety, as well as equity and the feeling of safety at an emotional level when they come into our spaces and making sure that they feel valued, seen, and heard. So those are the most pressing issues I see, and I see community ed being a great partner to work with both younger families, helping them develop those social emotional skills as they prepare for school, as well as providing support for the community as they navigate some of those thorny and uncomfortable conversations about racial equity and LGBT equity.
There's a number of questions about racial equity and racial disparities, and so with the League's permission, I'd like to make a 2-minute answer for this question. What should the district do to address racial equity and racial disparities in the school district? I'm sorry, what should the school board do to address racial equity and racial disparities in the school district? And Ben Carls, could we start with you now? So timer, these will be 2-minute answers because I think the topic can't be covered in a minute. So would you like to take a crack at it first?
I certainly will take a crack at it.
Thank you.
Well, some of the work the school board can do as the system-wide leaders is making sure that we are providing equity training for all of our teachers and providing opportunities for our scholars to lead the way. And we are doing some of that. North Junior High, for instance, has a class that is working with that, and it's really awesome to see that happening in our district. But specifically, we need to make sure that we as a school board would be the leaders of that we are pushing forward proposals and training and development and funding it in a way that is concurrent with our values of equity and making sure we are closing those gaps. Looking for opportunities where we can close that opportunity gap that some of our families don't have. With a district as large as ours and with its vast economic opportunities, we need to look at the opportunity gap provided by that, where some of our families have no problem experiencing museums, vacations, trips, but how do we provide that for our families that don't have that? And there are ways we can do that that are financially responsible while also addressing the equitable concerns. Providing teachers the support necessary for equitable teaching, such as providing workshop days that are paid for them to work and unpack their own work and what they do in the classroom, both curricular-wise as well as their spaces and the emotional spaces they've created, and their own training with their own awareness of how their whiteness, in the most part, and the whiteness of our system impacts all of our learners on a daily basis.
Tanya Khan.
The main thing I was thinking about regarding our racial equity is that barriers need to be broken via bias training. I think it's really important for teachers to speak to people of color and become part of programs where they will understand another person's experience. The other thing that I was thinking of is that we have a lot of diverse students in our district, and putting them in a position where they could speak to teachers and tell their story would be another thing I think that would help teachers understand. Thanks.
Dave Larson.
I think some of the things that the school board can do is to make sure that we're very supportive of the teachers, the administration, the staff, where if they need any kinds of resources to enlarge the whole diversity, because Hopkins now is about 46% diverse. I've been in the community now for over 44 years. When I first started, we specifically picked the Hopkins School District to live in. I can see that we have made progress, but basically it's the functions of the school board to make sure we support the staff, administration, the superintendent, and going to make sure that we outreach to the various, what you call sometimes people sourcing, to make sure you get to the other groups, make sure that we sometimes have maybe internships with student teaching where they have an opportunity, where we give opportunity to diversity. And by diversity, I know, I mean, it's more than just black and white. It's got to do with religious diversity, sexual orientation diversity. It is, we are a human mosaic, and you have to be sure that we support that, not only in what we do, but what we fund. And that's one of the functions of a school board. We do handle the purse strings. And I think that the board, current board, we are really very much aware of the diversity that we want to bring, because it's an experience that everybody will benefit by it. So,
Chris Newcomer.
One of the most audacious goals, I think, of Vision 2031 is to eliminate racial predictability on standardized tests, which is a huge goal. And I think for us to get there as a district, we need to really start thinking about just what Ben said, allowing our teachers to unpack what's happening in their lives and their worldviews and other people's worldviews, so we can work together collectively to make sure that what your race is does not predict your future. And so I think the school board's philosophy and way we should be working about it is the fact that a very smart school board member who is not running for re-election challenged us to think about our budget as a moral document. And I think once we start to think about our budget, which is really one of the only couple things we control as a school board, which is policy, budget, and hiring and firing the superintendent, we need to really think about where we are spending our money if racial equity and solving racial disparities is really important. So it starts with us at the school board of taking a step back and saying, what's really important to us, and are we really walking our talk with where we're spending our money? Because then if we are, and if we really believe that eliminating racial predictability in test scores is an audacious goal we should solve, then that's what we need to be doing.
Katie O'Shea Peterson.
That is a heavy question, and candidly, I feel the weight of that question and have pondered my response to that question quite a bit. As a graduate of Minnetonka High School and St. Olaf College, to say that I am a product of white privilege would be an understatement. And it's something, unpacking those racial biases that we carry with us unconsciously and without malicious intent is something that we all have to think about. And I think that the Hopkins School Board and the Hopkins School District has started those efforts from what I've seen. And I think that one of the things that I've seen and heard so far is their efforts to ensure racial equity with the teachers and the educators and the administrators that our students see every single day. And putting those teachers of color in front of our kids, male teachers in front of our kids, and showing them, you know, that they can be and do anything they want to, as easy as that is to say and as difficult as that is to achieve, is truly critical to our role as a board, and not something that I take lightly.
Steve Adams.
This is just not a school problem. And there was an article in the Star Tribune last week, September 6th, that kind of pointed out to me that, you know, it's a shared responsibility with the rest of our society. Minnesota has some of the deepest racial disparities in the nation, whether you're talking about housing, whether you're talking about income, employment, it's across the board. And I don't think it's fair to expect schools to fix all of that. What we reflect is what's happening in our society, unfortunately. We see a decline in affordable housing in our district. And I've talked to city managers and mayors to try and promote more affordable housing in our district. There's a guy that I go to here every year that I go to the NSBA, the National School Board Association conference. His name is William Parrott. He teaches at Boise State University. And he studies the effects of family income on achievement. And there's a direct correlation. It's just amazing. And I first noticed it when I was looking at SAT tests, believe it or not, I think 6 years ago. And I was looking for correlations. Who scored well on the SAT, you know, and why, you know, and was it family education? Was it the kid's color? Well, it turned out family income had a direct correlation. For every additional $5,000 in family income, the test scores went up about 5 points. So that really alerted me to the fact that it's an income issue. We do what we can in the district. I just talked to a guy, it's a paraprofessional up at the high school today, Al Nunes. Al's conducting a class, essentially, for black male students called Invictus to try and address the lack of achievement among that group.
Shannon Andreessen.
Thank you. This is an important question, and so much so that on one of the Vision 2031 strategic teams that I was a part of was vigilant equity and authentic inclusion. I feel that it is really important that as a school board, we keep those two values as something that we examine every time that we make a decision, whether it be budget or policy, that we come to the table with that lens and try and see to the best of our ability how we can make changes that will benefit all students. One of the things that I do when I serve on the LAC is use AMSD's Reimagine Minnesota tenets. There are 9 of them to address the opportunity gap that we have in Minnesota. I use that to draft position statements when we're writing our platform, which we do. We meet weekly to do that. And those tenets go across the board, but one of the most important is that students need to see themselves reflected in teachers and staff and administration in the schools. So addressing that issue is something that we can start doing immediately, and Hopkins already has. Another important part is that this is, like Steve said, not just a school issue. This is about disrupting a system. And to do that, it takes all of us. So we need to examine the ways in which we perpetuate this system ourselves, but we also need to start breaking apart the things that divide our children within the schools and bringing them together. Thank you.
The next question deals with school start times. And we'll start with Shannon Andreessen. So we'll go back to 1-minute answers, if that's okay.
Yes, that's,
Should the school board consider any changes in school start times at the elementary, middle, or high school level? Should I say it again? Should the school board consider any changes in school start times at the elementary, middle, or high school level?
Yeah, I think that that's a really important question. We all know the research, we've all seen it, that teens in particular need a lot of sleep, and they do best when they arrive at school later. They learn more and are more productive. Should the school board consider it? Absolutely, based on that research. But they also need to consider that this isn't just about research, it's about the community, and what does the community need? And so I think that we need to engage in conversations with parents, with staff, and to see, will this be beneficial for the family, not just for the student? But I definitely would support those conversations happening and hope to actually have them with you.
Ben Carls.
Definitely, I think we need to look at school start times. As a teacher, I definitely get that feeling starting at 7 o'clock in the morning with high school students and the difficulty they have waking up and coming prepared to learn, especially at the level of their learning. Meanwhile, while my 3.5-year-old is up at 5:30 in the morning, ready to go. So definitely it's a conversation to have, and it's also a conversation to look at if we are not able to change our start times to be more flexible, where can we flex time with our scholars? Where can we look at innovation in terms of how learning takes place? Where can we differentiate path, place, and product? And so that the learning isn't always the traditional brick and mortar schoolhouse that we grew up with, but where the class of 2031 and beyond is going to be experiencing their learning, to have that flexibility.
Tanya Khan.
So my daughter had trouble waking up in the morning because of all the homework she had as a teenager at the high school. And for a lot of students, it can be a struggle at the high school level to wake up early because they have multiple activities such as, you know, hockey or any sports or debate or what have you. So I think that definitely needs to be addressed. And just regarding the younger students, every student is different, but like Ben was saying, they really do, the younger ones have a tendency to wake up earlier. And it really messes up not only the child's time, but also the parents. And I think it's really important to focus on improving that.
Dave Larson.
Well, I'll give you the typical lawyer answer. It depends. You know, you can satisfy some people some of the time. You can satisfy some people all of the time. And there are sometimes you can never satisfy them at all. This is not a real easy issue. It depends on what kind of skin you have in the game. Where are your kids at it? What are the work schedules for the parents? Then you have transportation issues. There are money issues. When I was on the special ed committee, we were talking about transportation. To put another bus line, you're talking about $65,000. I think I'm going to delegate this problem to Rhoda, our superintendent. She is brilliant. The answer still is it depends. We are not going to please everybody. I don't want to be negative, but that's the reality of it. Thank you.
Chris
And that goes for you people at home too, watching.
Chris Newcomer.
Well, one of the higher level questions we need to start asking ourselves, and Ben alluded to it, is does learning always have to take place in school? And if we change that paradigm, where do school start times belong? I understand it's an issue, and as a former school board, as a current school board member, we've addressed it, we've had conversations. It's a balance for us. It's a balance between the money we get from the state to fund this, the start times, parents' needs, and student needs. And it is a delicate balance to find those. One solution, which I know won't fly, is that we just put our kindergartners and our 12th graders on the same bus, and they all start at the same time. Tell parents that, of a kindergartner. or an 11th grader. That's not, so it's a nuanced issue. It's something, yes, we should be talking about on a regular basis, but the solution is not just changing start times, because there's so many sort of waterfall effects about athletics and after school and daycare and who wants to put their 3-year-old or 5-year-old on a bus at 6:45 in the morning.
Katie O'Shea Peterson.
Okay, I do. I mean, tip of the hat, Ben. My 8-year-old was up at 6 o'clock this morning, and he didn't go to school till 9:30. So personally, I think it would be great. That said, and the research supports it, which I think is key as well. But one of the other things that I think is really important to consider is this isn't a debate or a discussion that's unique to Hopkins. Neighboring districts have made this change, and neighboring districts know where the landmines lie. And so their experience is something that we as Hopkins can draw off of, and I think that that's a really important thing to note. I also, believe that we need to take into consideration all the stakeholders, as I mentioned before. And as Dave mentioned, it's transportation, it's extracurriculars, it's the teachers, it's the community members. So all the stakeholders, yes to my 8-year-old on a bus at 6:45, and let's see how it worked for Edina and Wayzata and, our neighboring members.
Steve Adams.
Well, I say definitely yes. We need to change the start times. Edina did it, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, something like that. Wayzata did it, I think, last year. St. Louis Park is going to do it starting next school year. So there are proven models. But to me, the research really tells the story. I've read the study by the Minnesota Sleep Institute, believe it or not, that tells how student achievement increases with a later start time for secondary students. So I'm in favor of it. What the public needs to understand is it's going to cost you some money because it's all the transportation problem. We've looked at this, I think, 2 or 3 times in my tenure on the board, and it usually ends up reflecting about another $500,000 a year in transportation costs. And the state's not going to give it to us. So it's got to come out of the local taxpayers. So, but I definitely think we do what's responsible for our students.
The next question will start with Steve Adams, and here is the question. What challenges does the district have with busing long distances?
Well, we're kind of unique as a district. We've got, if anyone's seen a map of the district, and a lot of people wonder why does it look like that? Because it's a result of a merger of about 10 different school districts since about 1950. So we've got this oddly configured school district, and we've got to run bus routes through it. And that really is the reason we've got higher transportation costs than some of the other districts, because it's a very circuitous route. So, there's nothing we can do about that. The district is going to stay the same size, the same shape that it's been for years. So, but we have done, I think the first year I was on the board, we reduced transportation costs by $600,000 in that first year. And the way we did it was by reducing the number of stops, because every stop costs you money. And we had a lot of unhappy parents as a result, but we met our budget.
Shannon Andreessen.
Thank you. I believe I need to defer to Steve on this one, knowing what the challenges to busing are for the district. But I am fully aware of the size and shape and breadth of this district, and I can imagine that it is quite an achievement to get kids to school on time. We can see how quickly that can fall apart when there's bad weather. So it just is a good example of showing just how difficult it is to navigate this system in this district. But so far, I think we're doing pretty well.
Ben Carls.
I get this on a personal, local, and immediate level because, like I said, I'm in that little scratch of Edina off 169 that my daughter is like she's the last one on the bus and she's on her own for about 3 minutes based on the tracker, and especially dealing with some of the late buses we've been having this school year. So I get the challenges that we have with our district being shaped oddly and with our distance between the schools, but I go back to the intentional focus of shifting the attendance boundary lines to be equitable and making sure that our scholars are more reflective in all the schools and not just in certain schools. So I think if we are leading with that value of equity and making sure our scholars have the best experience they have, that trumps a longer bus route.
Tanya Khan.
So there are multiple challenges regarding busing long distances. Like Shannon and Steve said, our district has, arms in Golden Valley, Minnetonka, St. Louis Park, and I think parts of Eden Prairie. And so we have a lot of, I have the most experience at the high school level, so there are a lot of students who have those after-school programs, they have the before-the-school programs. We have HTC, we have MCTC, so, to accommodate, we actually need an excellent coordinator, or maybe more than one coordinator. Also on the elementary level, these kids have a lot of before-school programs and after-school programs. So it is a complex question, and I think actually our superintendent, Rhoda, will be an excellent person to handle that.
Dave Larson.
What Tanya's alluding to, the school district, the Hopkins School District, I think it's a lot of you know, we have 7 different cities that we're dealing with. Sure, it's all of Hopkins, it's southern Minnetonka, it's Plymouth, St. Louis Park, Golden Valley, did I skip anybody? A little sliver of Edina is there. So you've got to make accommodations when you have that width of territory. We have, I think we just got a new software package that helps the transportation and it's like dominoes to make sure that the buses, you're going to have to pick them up somehow. And in my viewpoint, safety of the students is the primary issue. And so Steve brought it up, it's going to cost money. So basically, it is an issue we are aware of. We try to do the best. And I guess that's the best you can do. You can try to accommodate as many groups or parts of the city as you can, and then after that, deal on an individual basis if something has to be worked out.
Chris Newcomer.
I think there's a change and a shift in how we're approaching problems in the Hopkins district. For many years, there are a lot of silos that exist in education in a lot of companies and areas, but what we're trying to do is move from a siloed thinking approach to a systems thinking approach, where the entire system is looked at as a whole. And I think as we start to do that both in a lot of our education programs, a lot of our teacher trainings, we're also looking at that in transportation. And anytime you can go from thinking of silos to systems, you really can start to solve some of those complex issues, like how do we deal with busing kids long distance? How do we deal with start times? All of those become things that the whole can think of within a systems versus a silo. So I think that's the way we're going to hopefully help deal with some of these transportation issues, but also deal with a lot of the other things that our district is going to be talking about and trying to do in the near future.
Katie O'Shea Peterson.
Due to my professional life in cybersecurity, I have a lot of experience with saying, I don't know the answer to that question. But I know somebody who does. And in general, I don't know that the school board is the team of people that you want addressing that question directly. But I know that Hopkins has addressed it through Dr. Mary Perry Reed's letters to the community very graciously and humbly. So I believe that we've addressed the issues fairly well, and I have no doubt that either a task force or people who are far more equipped than probably any of us up here are working on the problems that the size and the distance that our district poses, that they're working on those problems. So,
Thank you. So we're getting close to the end, and we don't have quite enough time to go through another 7-minute question. So would you candidates be willing to answer this question in one sentence, not to run on, and the timer does not have to time this. And we'll start with Katie O'Shea Peterson. And so try answering this in one sentence. The superintendent has talked about turning the high school into an international baccalaureate school, extending that program from the middle schools. What do you think about that? In one sentence.
I believe we have hired a rock star superintendent and am fully committed to exploring the majority of her ideas.
Steve Adams.
I think there's a lot of good things about IB, but I'm not sure it could coexist with our advanced placements classes at the high school. I'd have to get input from teachers.
Shannon Andreessen.
I think that IB is a really exciting option, but it also poses challenges. So again, I would defer to those educators, in particular the ones in the middle school that have already implemented an IB program.
Ben Carls.
Coming from a system that has both IB and AP and autonomous learner programs and online learning programs in the same building, it can totally be done, and I support it 100%.
Tanya Khan.
So I've heard really good things about IB schools. They're actually internationally recognized, and the good thing about them is that they make students think creatively. That's it.
David Larson.
My answer is yes. I'm done.
Chris Newcomer.
I think IB allows us to have a learning framework that we've been missing in our schools, and so if that can bring a continuity from our 7th grade to our 12th grade, I would be very interested in looking at it.
Thank you, candidates, for being willing to be so brief. Can we try one more round of this with another question? This is about Vision 2031. Can you try to answer this in one sentence? What is one specific thing you would do as a board member to support Vision 2031, pardon me. And can we start with Chris Newcomer? Or it can be one general thing, if specific is too hard.
I think the way that we as the school board can support Vision 2031 is to give our superintendent the bandwidth and the ability to make changes without having to have everything figured out at the front.
Katie O'Shea Peterson.
I can do it in one word: listen.
Steve Adams.
Find funding for all of the different options that are outlined in 2031.
Shannon Andreessen.
I got distracted by everyone else's answer. I think the most important thing that we can do for Vision 2031 is talk to people about it.
Ben Carls.
I would say we leverage our most important asset, which is our teachers and the direct instruction, to make sure it's quality, which is the most direct impact on our scholars.
Tanya Khan.
I think to support Vision 2031, we need to increase communication, especially amongst parents, students, and staff, because we need to all work together to make this come to fruition.
Dave Larson.
The best thing I could do is get reelected. And I mean that seriously, because I think the 2031 is a brilliant idea, and we are so fortunate to have Rhoda Mary Perry as our superintendent. It's the best thing I've done in the last 3 years.
Candidates, I really appreciate your willingness to try to answer really briefly so that we could get more questions in. We have many more questions, but we have no more time to answer them. So now let's go to your closing remarks for a minute each. And can we start with Steve Adams and just go right down the line as you're seated? Okay, so Steve Adams, your closing remarks.
All right, thank you. I want to again thank the audience for participating tonight, those viewing at home for providing questions, and the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this. You do a great job. I'm asking voters to re-elect me on the school board for a third term on November 5th. I believe I've been effective in helping form consensus on the board and applying my background in business and information technology and making some strategic investments that have generated gains in student learning, parent satisfaction, and enrollment. While we've made great strides in creating an optimum learning environment for our students, I think we can do more. And tonight we've discussed some of those options, like moving the start time back for secondary schools, providing out-of-school learning experiences for our students, and all the other innovative practices that are outlined in the Vision 2031 that could further increase learning opportunities for our children. So I would ask the public to help keep the momentum going by electing me, Steve Adams, on November 5th.
Shannon Andreessen.
So thank you for a terrific conversation tonight, for showing up, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event and giving me the opportunity to hear all of your questions and concerns about the district. I want to continue this community building as I visit with you on the campaign trail, so show up to events. I'll be at your door and hopefully at your school so we can continue to talk. And I welcome your increased feedback so that I can earn your vote on November 5th. Last year I served on 2 Vision 2031 strategic teams, and it was that work that inspired me to run for the Hopkins School Board. So I realized through that work that parent voice needs to be strongly represented on the school board as we move forward, but also that perspective needs to include all of our students. So I thank you for sharing your time with me and your questions. I look forward to serving you as a member of the Hopkins School Board, and I ask for your vote on November 5th. Thank you.
Ben Carls.
Thank you, League of Women Voters. Thank you, audience, for coming out and having this opportunity to share ideas and meet each other. I think regardless of who you end up voting for, I feel confident that our school board will be fantastic. So that's really a wonderful place to be in as a resident and as a parent in the building, in the district. As an educational leader, my strengths lie in strategic planning and equity. I'm an accomplice in equity work and a parent of 2 small children who are just starting their process in the Hopkins schools. So I'm in it for the long haul, and I'm looking forward to being part of the change and making our district go from great to world class. I look forward to your vote on November 5th.
Tanya Khan.
Thank you again to the audience members, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting. So my strengths really lie in communication, and I think I have the sensitivity and the creativity to really increase communication amongst parents, staff, and students, especially since I've worked in the district. And I think because I was on the inside, I think I understood a lot of things better than someone on the outside would. And I know what possibly needs improvement. And I'm a team player who likes to put others' needs first. Thank you.
Dave Larson.
Well, first I'd like to thank our timekeeper, Sandy Brandt. I'd like to thank our moderator and all of the people that helped both of you to get to where we are. With that said, my top priority still is the students. Student achievement. Every child deserves a brilliant future. After that, fiscal responsibility is a necessary thing that has to be accounted for. And then my last item, support for the teachers, staff, administration in their work environment for all they do is essential. You need that interaction with the students and the teachers. Thank you for hosting this. It's been a pleasure to be here. Please vote. If you don't vote for me, please vote November 5th. You got 4 chances to vote.
Chris Newcomer.
Thank you, League of Women Voters, for allowing us to share our thoughts about the district. I have worked and run boards, and I believe the best boards bring a lot of different views together, and I think with all of these candidates, there are so many great ways of looking at problems that the Hopkins School District would be well served. We all need to bring our own skills to our school board seat, and the ones that I bring are asking questions. I think that's very imperative for a board to be doing. Also to provide strategic thinking about how we might do things different, or as the question we asked 2 years ago when we launched Vision 31, how might we? And the last one is to really start to view change in the work we're doing through both an equity and an innovation lens. And those two things combined will move us forward. So I look forward to talking with you at the coffee shop, the grocery store, at school, and serving another 4 years on the Hopkins School Board.
Katie O'Shea Peterson.
Thanks again to the League of Women Voters for putting this together tonight, all of you for being here, and in particular, my fellow candidates. You guys made this look easy. Newsflash, it's not easy. So I'm not naive enough to think that when you guys go to the polls on November 5th that you're going to remember much of what I said tonight. And so when I thought about my closing statements, what I really wanted to get across was generally when you're voting for Katie O'Shea Peterson, that you're voting for a passionate supporter of Hopkins Public Schools. That you're voting for a woman with a strong professional background of negotiating, collaborating, and creative problem solving. In general, I think that, as other candidates have said, there's not a bad choice up here. So I would be humbled and honored to earn your vote on, and voice cracky, to earn your vote on November 5th. Thanks.
Thank you, candidates. Thank you, League of Women Voters, Minnetonka, Eden Prairie, Hopkins. And thank you to the audience and to everyone who views this forum on cable and video. The forum will be broadcast until the election, and you can watch it also on lwvmeph.org, and there will be a link there to the streaming video. This concludes the formal event. This room will be closed at 8:30, but you are welcome to meet the candidates informally in the lobby. Remember, everyone, to vote on or before November 5th. Let's give the candidates a hand.